When Sadiq Khan and these guys, they all come in with this happy smile and nice. They got a very dark plan and dangerous plan in back of them. And you've seen it in the city. You've seen it in London. I just use that as an example of what's happened. And the Brits aren't going to take it.
Many academics believe that Britain is on the brink of civil war. The question is, who put it there? Hello there, you awakening wonders. Steve Bannon believes that the United Kingdom could be on the very precipice of civil war, and anyone who lives in the UK or has been following the news stories there will be aware of rising social tensions. The rise of nationalism, deep concerns about the subject of migration, and this is added to a deep mistrust of political and media and even judicial institutions. Let's have a look at Steve Bannon's comments and some analysis in British media, both online and mainstream, and look at how Britain has found itself on the very threshold of civil unrest that would have been unimaginable a short while ago. And when we say people think Britain's on the precipice of civil war, we're not talking about mouths for hire or online influencers or pundits. We're talking about serious academics that look at the social conditions that often lead to civil unrest and strife. The example that they're using is Argentina in the immediate era after Perón. Let's get into Bannon's comments and then let's have a serious look at why the UK has found itself in such a difficult situation. How do the issues of free speech, media manipulation, deep institutional mistrust, death of ideals, the end of nationalism, and a bureaucratic class of politicians that are completely out of touch with the people that they govern lead to conditions that are likely to lead to conflagrations unseen in Europe for, I don't know, is it centuries? A long while, except when you look across the Irish Channel and consider the great nation of Ireland.
The lead story in the Daily Telegraph on Thursday night was my speech at the National Conservative Convention, where I said there's a civil war coming to England. Nigel Farage is at the conference today for reform. Nigel Farage has done an amazing job. With no money, he's bootstrapped a party called the Reform Party. It now polls, the Tories are at 14%. Think about it, a party that's been around for 250 years, a party that won World War II with Winston Churchill as its head, a party that had Margaret Thatcher, a party that for 12 years, ran Britain, right, is at 14%. Why? They were the guys, just like the rhinos and Republicans here, they looked the other way. They're controlled opposition. They looked the other way because what is today? Boys and girls, what's today? It's the 10th anniversary of Merkel allowing the first wave of 1 million Syrian refugees, asylum seekers, to come to Germany, to begin the destruction of Germany. Who didn't allow that? Hungary didn't allow it. Poland didn't allow it. What are the countries in Europe that are making it right now? Wait for it. Let me think. Oh, yeah, that's right. Hungary and Poland. The United Kingdom can't sell a 30-year bond. They just found out yesterday, oh, my gosh, we have a £50 billion either mistake or we didn't see it in this year's budget.
It's one thing for Steve Bannon, who's, I think, actually a pretty brilliant political operator and cultural analyst, but he's certainly someone who draws controversy and skepticism. But when you talk about David Benz, who's getting a lot of traction in the UK, talking about the shifting tectonic plates of civil war, using the metaphor that earthquakes are difficult to accurately predict, but you can see fault lines and shifting tectonic plates and patterns, he's using that analogy, that metaphor system, that image system, to analyse the fissures, fractures and breaking down of the UK. I speak as a person who's lived in the UK most of my life. Obviously, I am British, and I've recognised for some time the breakdown of the social contract, the dismissal and derision directed at the working class. I was very aware during the Brexit period that even as a person that was then certainly considered liberal, even if it was an anti-establishment liberal, that working class people and the communities that I grew up in and am from were being routinely undermined, attacked, vilified, demonised. In fact, it became normal and culturally acceptable to undermine British people. And what I think we're witnessing now is the long-fostered resentment of a class of people that just a generation or two were being invited to die for their nation, then being told there's no such thing as nation, to be ashamed of their nation, that they couldn't display their flags, that they didn't have any rights. And then probably this has wide geopolitical macro connotations along the lines of a serf class is shifting. The requirement for a serf class is altering. Advances in AI and robotics mean you no longer require the same type of labourer that you once required. There will always be a serf class, a wise man told me, but the racial dynamics will shift. The skill set of the serf class will exist. We talk now a lot, don't we, about the lanyard class and the laptop class. And what we seem to have at the moment is a managerial and bureaucratic class that are running the UK that have no connection to their ideals and identity that British people feel very keenly. And in the end, that becomes a spiritual issue. What is the spirit of a nation? Even for someone like me who believes in a transcendent reality that we all have access to, I still recognise that if I say to you, oh, there's an Italian guy outside, or a German woman, or a Chilean man, certain images will come to mind, or a Swiss child, or someone from Eritrea. Whilst there might be stereotypes, there also seem to be reliable characteristics that seem to pertain to tribal identity. When you annihilate that, when you elevate the tribal identity of different cultures at the expense of the culture and identity of the indigenous group, you're likely to create hostility. One of the reasons I take Bannon seriously is because I saw him talking about the 2008 crash about 5 years ago at the Oxford Union, and his analysis about the rise of populism was brilliant then and has subsequently been shown to be prescient, i.e. Bannon identified that the future was going to be populist and that it could go left, it could go right, but centralised politics was going to break down. To some degree, I suppose, because of the advance of online immediate intercommunication, which means you can't control information in the same way that you once could. So now you're going to get new tribes, new identities, new movements. Fume! A lovely, fun, fidgety, fun thing to do with your hands in your mouth. Don't be disgusting. You're in a moment of stress, aren't you? You reach for something. Is it your what's name? Is it your jiggamabug? Or is it your snoot? All of those things are potential problem makers. Unlike fume, reach for it. This is why fume is so different and magnificent. There's no smoke, there's no vapor, no nicotine, just natural flavoured air that gives you something to reach for without chemicals. It's a mindful habit replacement. Sometimes breaking a habit isn't just about willpower. It never is, actually. Willpower is what will get you in trouble. You have to surrender your will to God. It's better to have something to reach for instead. Fume gives you an alternative. Built-in fidget features. It's not just about flavour. Fume has a magnetic, fidget-friendly design that keeps your hand busy and your mind engaged. Oh, baby, that's the stuff. Look at that. My hands is engaged. My mind is busy. Oh, the whole thing is working really well. Flavours that actually taste good. My favourite is crisp mint, but there are tons of options from citrusy to earthy. Over 500,000 people have already added fume to their daily routine. I totally get why. It's simple and satisfying and don't come with any of the downsides of smoking or vaping. And right now, if you order the Journey Pack using my code RussellBrand, 2 S's, 2 L's, you'll get a free fume topper, an awesome accessory to level up your experience. So if you've been thinking about changing your filthy, stinking, wretched habits, this is the perfect first step. Go to tryfume.com/RussellBrand. Use my code or use the QR code on the screen right now and grab yours today. Let's jump into this together now. It should surprise no one that talk of civil strife and even civil war has been in the air for months. In 2019, my former colleague at King's College London, David Betts, and I co-authored an essay examining the grim prospects for British democracy and the road to internal conflict that already loomed on the horizon. That essay, The British Road to Dirty War, explored the hollowing out of British democratic institutions, a long-running process that had by then left politics little more than a facade. The Brexit psychodrama exposed the extent of the rot. The political class, determined to thwart the referendum result, behaved with a deranged mixture of denial and contempt for the electorate. We saw in this not merely a passing convulsion, but the symptom of a chronic condition, one destined sooner or later to end badly, Brexit or no Brexit. In a sense, Britain's Trump moment was Brexit. What I mean by that is the entire media, institutional, political and professional class clearly had a preferred outcome. In the case of Trump, the preferred outcome was Hillary Clinton. The entire media machine was behind her. In a sense, the impact of the condemnation and criticism that Trump received then is still being played out and felt today because he's been so demonized that it's like he's not a human being in the eyes of even pretty reasonable and plausible intellectuals. The same thing happened during Brexit. So much machinery and airtime and paper and will and endeavour went into getting to people to vote to remain in the European Union, i.e. stay within the same set of institutional powers that celebrate Hillary Clinton. But when the British people voted against it, it kind of left this chasm. And even after it, people didn't accept it. People go, oh, well, it's a referendum. We live in a democracy. They voted to leave. They went, there's something wrong with them. They're mad. They're racist. It became a kind of hatred. And what was revealed, in fact, if nothing else, is people don't, in truth, believe in democracy. What people believe in is their own righteousness and then their ability to implement that righteousness. With the collapse of the classic left, by classic left, I mean a left that is broadly supportive of working people because it requires the support of the trade union movement to operate. When that went away under Clinton in your country, under Blair in mine, we were left with a left that ultimately uses wokeism and identity politics to mask the fact that it has no spine, no spirit, no soul. That was exposed during the rise of Trump populism and Britain choosing to leave the European Union. Subsequent to that, of course, we've had the COVID pandemic and the further revelations of that period that have shown more and more institutional biases and also have exposed the inability of centralised media authority in particular to direct the will of the people. They used to be able to tell you, we want you to vote for Margaret Thatcher now, and you'd vote for Margaret Thatcher. Now vote for Tony Blair. Now vote for Bill Clinton. Now vote for Obama. Now vote for Bush. The elections went their way. Well, not anymore. Now power is different. Information is different. And we are living in the paroxysms and the spasms of the breakdown of sets of institutions that no longer know how to control the masses. The uprising of the British people is at least in part a response to that. The decisions that have led to their dissatisfaction will be covered in more depth in these articles. The uprising itself is being facilitated, well, precisely by you and your participation in media spaces like this one. Viewing Britain from afar is sobering. The decline of a nation under the stewardship of its self-anointed managerial and political elite, a class long sustained by illusions of mastery, even as the evidence mounts to the contrary. Having written extensively with David Betts, I can say our position has never been that elites are simply incompetent, though many, of course, demonstrably are. Rather, their actions form a discernible pattern, and patterns imply purpose. Whether or not the chaos we now endure is consciously engineered at every turn is almost beside the point. The consequences are here, and we must all live with them. I think it's really interesting what it says about a managerial class, and I agree with that analysis. What you have is invested bureaucrats whose identity is vested solely in their individual and personal identity and superficial ideas like maybe some token following of a football club. No deep connection to community, no blood and guts willing to die for what you believe in. Look at them. Look of the last political leaders of the UK. An extraordinary bunch of anodyne figures, milksop, veal calf, hopeless saps and sops, invested primarily in their cultural class, not in the nation that they are, in the case of that montage, the leaders of. Let's have a look at what Bannon's saying.
Starmer's polling this morning is at 9%. Yesterday I said it was 11%. I was incorrect. I was corrected last night. It's at 9%. His deputy just got fired because she's a tax cheat or something. Sadiq Khan, you heard that name? Sadiq Khan, who's changed London in 10 years to make it a no-go zone. This is a foreshadowing of what's going to happen here in the good old United States of America. And I am not Islamophobe. There's many aspects of Islam as one of the great religions in the world that are quite moving, and it's a major religion. I am against Sharia supremacy, Islamic supremacy, Islamist and Islamist politics, and that's what you got. When Sadiq Khan and these guys, they all come in with this happy smile and nice. They got a very dark plan and dangerous plan in back of them, and you've seen it in the city. You've seen it in London.
Picking up on Rainsborough's article here, he says, whether or not the chaos we now endure is consciously engineered at every turn is almost beside the point. The consequences are here and we must all live with them. Well, I can't help but think that the chaos is deliberate and that it's not beside the point. From Blair onwards, there's clearly been a kind of master plan to vilify, undermine and demonize working class people, to legitimize ID schemes, mass managerialism, surveillance, total control and censorship. So I would say that it isn't beside the point. It's extremely significant and central to the point. The record of intentionality, in fact, is undeniable. Under Tony Blair, the Labour government pursued a policy of demographic transformation. As Andrew Neither, then a speechwriter and advisor to Blair, acknowledged in the Evening Standard in 2009, immigration policy was shaped in part by the desire to rub the right's nose in diversity. That was no accident, no bureaucratic mishap. It was an explicit goal, and its consequences are now written across Britain's social fabric. Likewise, the current Labour leadership under Sir Keir Starmer operates from a post-nationalist outlook, one that treats the very idea of nationhood as negotiable, even alien to the political class. Sometimes I wonder if our allegiance to nation stymies us and controls us. If you're devoted to your flag, whether that's the flag of Pakistan, the United States of America, Saudi Arabia, UK, or France, I believe that can be used to manipulate us and control us. Nevertheless, the nation has been a pretty successful way of maneuvering people through progress and technology, through agriculture and industry onwards. But the truth of the matter is this: in becoming a post-nationalist political class or post-nationalist political figure, what is made clear is that Keir Starmer and his bureaucratic peers dislike ordinary English, Scottish, Welsh, Northern Irish people. And even though Keir Starmer makes continual claims about his background and his father's and mother's working class credentials, it seems that there is no passion or compassion for British people, but a kind of disgust, a kind of regard for them as somehow unsanitary, and a desire to subjugate them, to deploy authoritarianism, always under the guise of necessary social care. David and I, the writer continues, identified a clear elite strategy of re-importing techniques of imperial governance into the domestic realm. The aim was to rule by division, to fracture society into communities, reward loyal in-groups, and discriminate against the majority through a two-tier system of justice, policing, and social policy. In other words, to adapt the colonial logic of divide and rule for use at home. This was not incompetence, it was a contrivance. That's why in my conversation with Tommy Robinson, I was very keen to advocate for true assimilation between Muslim Britain and working class, non-Muslim, Christian and other aspects of British working class cultural life. In so much as, if there is a kind of de facto condemnation of Muslim people, it's difficult for me to see a way through the conflicts, both ideological and maybe even martial, that are likely to take place. So in a sense, that's for me a strategic alliance as well as a personal affinity with people of all faiths.
And the Brits aren't going to take it. This St. George's flag and the Union Jack going up consistently, and the authorities now, and what they've done is gone the opposite extreme now with speech. They just jailed a left-wing guy who went to Arizona for a couple months, who'd said something about the transgender madness, and they put him in jail when he got back. Met him at the plane when he went back to London at Heathrow and threw him in jail.
So extraordinary to hear stories like that of Graham Linehan, the brilliant writer of Father Ted and a host of other shows, become the subject of conversation in these kind of media spaces that we occupy together, because Graham Linehan I've been aware of for such a long while. And whilst it's my personal opinion that he's allowed himself to get somewhat obsessed with the issue of trans rights and trans identity and the impact that it has on women and girls, that's up to him in a free speech society. If that's the issue that he's passionate about, some people are passionate about cricket, other people are passionate about media corruption. Graham Linehan's passionate about that. What I think is very interesting is Bannon's observation that the flag protests are likely a harbinger of greater social unrest. Here, Michael Rainsborough talks about other countries that have experienced deep civil unrest relatively recently and where it's led to civil strife and even war. How this will ultimately unfold is impossible to foresee. In our first exploration of this terrain, David and I sketched out the prospect of Britain's descent into what we call dirty war. Dirty war refers to a pattern of internal repression, most notoriously in Latin America during the 1970s. Years of vicious but low-intensity strife in which regimes and insurgents alike turn their weapons on segments of their own people. Such struggles are rarely declared openly nor bound by convention. They are fought in the shadows. The boundary between combatant and civilian dissolves, violence becomes selective, targeted, concealed. On the surface, life may appear undisturbed, whole regions untouched, yet beneath the facade, a subterranean struggle rages. Almost inevitably, this is accompanied by crackdowns on free speech and civil liberties, and that's exactly where the Graham Linehan and trans arguments become super relevant. In a way, it's unthinkable that figures essential to British culture, even though he's Irish, like Graham Linehan or J.K. Rowling, could become so maligned and condemned after their extraordinary contributions. And I actually don't even believe that the culture war benefits trans people. I think that they are a useful pawn to be deployed in a game that's about legitimizing authoritarianism and censorship. Whether we're talking about migrants or trans people, the way that these cultural artifacts and their presumed victimhood is deployed is always to advance elite and institutional authority. It's never to empower or otherwise benefit migrants or trans people. Do you really think even for a second that in the corridors of power and in the upper echelons of these steep hierarchies, people are sat around panicking about the rights of trans people and migrants? Think about it for a moment. Think about it. Think about how in COVID, the measures of care and authority that were taken were supposed to be to protect you. Did they protect you? Ask yourself that question and let me know in the comments and chat. The indispensable handmaidens of dirty war. To deny that the architecture for such measures is already taking shape in Western democracies, Britain included, is willful blindness. Over time, brutality becomes ordinary. The unspeakable seeps into common knowledge. Secrets circulate. Perpetrators protest innocence, but rumour, testimony and leakage of truth expose what everyone already suspects. Whether Britain is embarked upon such a path is speculation. Betts has outlined scenarios ranging from an urban-rural clash to targeted strikes on critical infrastructure. These are hypotheses, not predictions, yet precedent is sobering. Argentina's dirty war was prefigured by deep fissures within Peronism itself, as conservative and radical factions, most notably the Montoneros, splintered, then unleashed assassination and counter-assassination, spawning death squads that soon engulfed the state. At present, it's difficult to imagine such violence in Britain, cushioned as it is by democratic traditions and institutional inertia. But difficult to imagine is not the same as impossible. If Britain does not slide into a dirty war outright, a more plausible prospect is balkanisation, or in the local idiom, Ulster. We need not speculate abstractly. Within living memory, the United Kingdom has already endured its own version in Northern Ireland. The signs are visible. The recent flag protests in England reflect a deeper hostility toward the political class, which has systematically negated English self-expression and indulged in a ritual of national self-abnegation that contrasts sharply with the celebration of every other identity. People have been talking about that for a long while. How come if they can fly their flags, we can't fly our flags? And the fact is that's a bloody reasonable argument. And people have had enough. They've been pushed too far. The financial crash of 2008, the pandemic of 2019 onward has led to this rare and extraordinary moment that could truly lead to revolutionary change. That's the positive side of it. It could also lead to mass authoritarianism, clampdown and, death squads. But let's try and be optimistic. The message is unmistakable. The majority population, already disregarded on questions such as immigration, is told that its own symbols of belonging must be hidden, while the emblems of others are to be privileged and extolled. The protests are not simply a reaction to hypocrisy, but the eruption of resentment long bred by neglect, exclusion, and the steady withering of a people's right to recognise themselves. That's where it gets spiritual. Your identity, your connection to tribe and land and God. Institutional, bureaucratic politicians have failed to recognise that what they were embarking upon was a kind of ethnic cleansing of the ethnicity of the nation that they're supposed to govern. So distracted by the spectres of fascism and communism of the last century, they've failed to observe that new forms of totalitarianism are more insidious, more bureaucratic and more anodyne. That is a kind of fascism that doesn't tell you that it's fascism. It tells you that it's care. It tells you that it's concern. It's Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, gently lulling you to sleep with a pharmacological cocktail, maybe a hand job. But what price are you paying? I don't know why I said hand job. I was looking for a joke. She didn't do that in the film, by the way, either. So, let's not blame Oscar-winning actress. And once flags become tribal markers of territory and ideology, they also become precursors of deeper division, escalating tensions. And if the authorities persist in denying the causes, violence of an infernal kind, Northern Ireland has already shown us where such dynamics lead. Bombings, assassinations, even Latin American-style disappearances, this time carried out not by the state, by the IRA and other Republican groups. Let us assume for the moment that Britain is still some way off from such an outcome, and that the system retains just enough vitality to adapt fitfully to the popular will. Even so, faith in the system, stability, the belief that traditions of peaceful constitutional change can mediate deep divisions has been badly undermined. That corrosion has been accelerated intentionally by the outsourcing of sovereignty to supranational bodies, human rights courts, international bureaucracies, institutions whose rulings dilute and often override domestic consent. Of course, political commentary is littered with failed prophecies, and one should resist the temptation to indulge in historical clairvoyance. History rarely moves in straight lines. Contingency rules. I really like this analysis here. As with earthquakes, we cannot predict the exact timing of the rupture. What we can do, what Betts and others are attempting to do, is map the tectonics, and Britain's political ground is not rock solid. It is fault lines all the way down. So it's likely that we are going to see further collisions. My prayer is that September the 13th's protests pass peacefully and lovingly, and that Britain is able to harbour, hold and celebrate nationalism that indeed does have a true inclusivity. My prayer is that with Jesus Christ at the forefront, it's possible to reimagine the idea of nation. nation as something founded on compassion and inclusion. But the British people have had enough, and they've had enough quite rightly. They've been lied to, they've been intoxicated, poisoned and distracted for a long while by a cavalcade and endless carousel of lying and deceitful politicians. And in the end, leaders were likely to rise up from those exploited communities. And that seems to be happening now. Of course, my prayer is that this can be undertaken lovingly, but it must be undertaken almost at any cost. That's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and chat? Remember, join us on Rumble and get Rumble Premium if you want additional content from us. More important than any of that, though, stay free. Thanks for watching the video. Have a look at this one over here, or join us Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on Rumble.